David Nabong is from he's a garden and horticultural specialist with Brew and Grow Alternative Garden Supply, which is located right here in Crystal Lake. Has anybody been in that store? Lots of hands. Awesome, thank you. There are lots of hands. Yeah, this position involves product support with sales and horticulture support for hobbyist customers, as well as being the liaison to the area high schools that benefit from Brew and Grow's donation event. At MCC here, David is the adjunct instructor to the horticulture department, currently teaching topics in horticulture intro to hydroponics. This is a semester-long course that involves hands-on experience and theoretical study on hydro and aquaponic plant production and system maintenance. If you've not been over to the greenhouse on the other side of the building here for a while, they've taken one of the bays and are renovating it to encompass this huge system. So it's actually an awesome class if you guys need to sign up for something like that. Their goal is to produce sufficient produce to subsidize both the culinary department here at the college and the food services. So if you're here for lunch or whatever, who knows, you might be eating something the students have grown. So first I'd like to invite David to give his presentation. David.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm David Nabong. I'm an MCC graduate and product of the horticulture department here at MCC, and I have served in the horticulture field for about 15 years. I'm also the adjunct instructor teaching hydroponics and the independent study of hydroponics this semester. There was no hydroponics class prior to the first semester in fall 2013. I was recruited by Bruce Spangenberg, one of my mentors and former teachers, and the current head of the horticulture program. Hydroponics had always been an interest for me, and I had become very interested in the concept of aquaponics as several years ago as well. It wasn't until I took a position with Brew and Grow that I really had an opportunity to develop those interests. But I had never imagined that I would have the opportunity to share my interest by teaching and speaking with you here at Bioneers. The idea for this class really came from the students in the horticulture program. They sought to explore techniques beyond the traditional horticulture. Many students attempted to design individual projects in their greenhouse classes. Some did well, some had less success, an experience I shared during one of my first greenhouse classes. So they insisted on a class dedicated to hydroponics. So what is hydroponics? Hydroponics is a method of growing plants without the use of soil. Hydroponics is a broad term encompassing several different techniques, including aeroponics, deep water culture, NFT or the nutrient film technique, and aquaponics. Hydroponics lends itself well to the practice of controlled environment agriculture, which at its very base means in a greenhouse, and we can treat our crops to near ideal conditions, providing precise levels of nutrients. Many of the first students in the first class knew little more than you could grow plants in water without soil. We were in for quite a semester. One of the best things about this class was the existing cohort, an excellent dynamic to which I was readily accepted. But then I broke their hearts. The text and the curriculum is dry and technical, and I opened with this assignment. What if the world's soil runs out? It's a heavy title, right? This article was published by Time magazine in 2012, and it details several troubling factoids, the worst of which is we have approximately 60 years of topsoil left. And this is due to myriad reasons, but is truly troubling when we consider by the year 2015, there'll be more than 9 billion people on the planet. The loss of this soil, continuing at the current rate, would mean a 30% reduction in the amount of food that can be produced, and the projected demand of more than 50% increase needed for food production. It's difficult to make the math add up, but it was that first article which I feel really brought them in, the students in my class. Hydroponics could be part of the solution, and they could also. Our first few weeks, we set up our systems. These are hobbyist type systems, but all very capable. One of our first challenges was our nutrients. Hydroponics requires that nutrients are in the water solution in precise proportions. The lab everyone loved the most was our fertilizer calculations. They weren't expecting to have to do math in horticulture. Once we figured out our systems and nutrients and pH, it was all about monitoring, recording, and reseeding until we started harvesting. There's a little progress shot there. There's another progress shot. We've got cucumbers there. That's mostly lettuce in that system. There's herbs back in that system. Another progress shot. Things are really coming along. Another progress shot. We originally planted several varieties of lettuce as well as some specialty greens such as tatsoi, pak choi, herbs such as basil and cilantro, and trays of microgreens. We began to harvest early October, and over about 5 weeks, we were able to get approximately 400 ounces of lettuce, not including the microgreens and herbs. By the second half of the semester, we switched gears to start including aquaponics. Now, aquaponics is a little bit different. Most likely, if you Google aquaponics, it will tell you that you spelt it wrong. The overall idea is, if you feed the fish make waste, and the waste becomes nutrients for the plants. And that's kind of how it's simplified when you find it on the internet. Aquaponics has a great promise of a sustainable technology, but I opened this half of the semester with these articles. And this is basically a slur from Cornell University. And you can say it says offered for thought, or offered for thinking up there. Not so much as saying that there's no reason to do aquaponics because it's much cheaper to do it hydroponically. But I also added this article. This article comes from Fish Farming International, which is an aquaculture trade magazine. The interesting thing about this is this particular author is quite strident in his support of aquaponics. And coming out of aquaculture, that's reassuring. I also told my class to be skeptical about everything they read and see about aquaponics, including what came from me. As I mentioned earlier, aquaponics is a blending of aquaculture and hydroponics, and certain ideals must yield to compromises. It's great in theory, but in the application, it's not so much. In fact, many commercial attempts have already failed. We built our aquaponics system, and quite literally, we had to beg, borrow, and steal to get the parts we needed for it. Those there came out of the trash. Those were begged from a company that no longer needed them. They were going to go into the trash. We actually got to buy the PVC. That was nice. Some of the stuff actually had to be borrowed from my basement. However, in the end, there's everybody actually chipping in to help put the system together, modifying the barrels. In the end, we had a resounding success. Over the last 8 weeks, we got 2 crops of approximately 51 heads of romaine of equal size and quality to that which we had in the hydroponic system. This semester, about half of the students from the first class stayed on for independent study. Our goal is to offset some of the produce we use for food services in the culinary department here at MCC. This is an ambitious undertaking. Estimates from the department show a weekly usage of 24 to 48 heads of romaine, 24 to 48 heads of leaf lettuce, 10 to 20 pounds of spinach, 24 to 30 heads of iceberg lettuce, plus herbs, celery, and etc. We have almost all of the equipment and all of the drive to go at it, but we have had a few early setbacks. But the class is down working in the greenhouse right now. That's actually not true. They decided to come and watch. And when our collaboration with food services and culinary department is a success, We'll have a new motto for sustainability at MCC. There's our system that we're going to use to produce all of it. There's a look of the greenhouse right now. No more local than down the hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Kirk Cashmore. And Kirk is the owner of Cashmore's Produce and Ponics, which is a farm started in 2010 with a different approach to traditional growing. Its current approach is vertical hydroponics with a twist of adventure, ingenuity, and self-sustainability. Now, that's actually not a lie. I've been to Kirk's. I know he is completely self-taught, and I swear he is a MacGyver. And if you've been to his farm, you totally understand what I'm saying. So anyway, after 3 years now of construction, design, and tweaking a barn for inside year-round food production, the operation up in Harvard off McGuire Road is capable of producing 3,200 head of lettuce and 180 tomato plants. And he just started with 2,000 redworms and a few piles of composted manure, just to capture the worm castings and build great soil. From there to hydroponics, who knew? It is heated with one biomass heater and a homemade solar air furnace. Its fuel footprint is relatively small, and Kirk delivers his fresh produce weekly to local establishments like Duke's Ale House here in Crystal Lake and to the local farmers markets. There is no food wasted. If it doesn't make it at the retail level, it is delivered to the local food pantries in and around McHenry County. So, Kirk?
Thanks, Brenda. All right, 1 second. How's everybody doing tonight? Good, thanks for coming out. And thanks for MCC for having me too. I feel honored to be here. I'm just a guy that's trying to farm. So I'm going to take it easy through these, but here we go. I started, like she said, I started the farm in late '09. I went to college. Well, I'll take it back. I went to college for ski area management right out of high school, and that took me to Vail, Colorado, and I was running snowcats, and I was having the life out west. And my folks got tired of it. They said, you need to do something with your life. Come back and go to school. So I went back. I went to Northern Michigan University in Marquette because I'm a big snowmobiler and I got to stay in deep snow. And I learned business management. So I came out of there and it took me to Menards, and I worked at Menards for 10 years. I had a hardware department I ran, and I got into contractor sales. And it took me I met a lot of pole barn builders, and that was a big advantage for me. I got to build a beautiful pole barn as a weekend project. It took me about 2 years to build it. I fell off some scaffolding once and I shot a nail through my hand once. But other than that, it was a pretty smooth operation. So there it is, and there's a kind of a shot from a distance. The front 30 feet is all steel roof, and then the back 70 is a polycarbonate that allows me the natural lighting. So with that being said, I do everything inside of there. These are early on photos. The first photo with my dad, he's kind of my right-hand man, but he goes to Florida for 4 months out of the year, so I lose him. And so here I was last winter. I had some friends over in the excavation business. They dug my trenches for me, and then I just started building it. So I spent the whole winter inside building these 2 racks you see here on the left behind that wheelbarrow. Each of them is 4 feet wide, 60 feet long, and at capacity they each hold 8,000 gallons. My original intent with this building was to do aquaponics strictly, but I had a couple issues with A, courage, and B, financing. Those are both pretty strong, detours. So I am just a hydroponics facility at the moment, but I am set up for aquaponics, and I do have future plans of that. Hanging around guys like this is a good way to learn. So again, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. So here's just a couple shots of me, building the racks. I took it 8 feet at a time so I could manage it all myself. And here we go. So it is a three-shelf system, I should say. One pump runs the whole apparatus, and that pump draws less than an amp. Feasibly, it's very cost effective. I do have artificial lighting. You can see here my top shelves are natural lighting, and those shelves are the superior shelves for lettuce production. Here's a shot, got some little bit of everything growing. You can see my artificial lighting and a sand filter there off of an old swimming pool. Now, all this lumber I did use for the racks. Like I said, I did 10 years at Menards. So when the store changed, I was fortunate enough to buy their old fence line, and that consisted of 2,800 2x8s, 14 feet long, and I got those delivered for a song and a dance. So the whole barn was built out of secondhand lumber. I spent many a days with a worm drive saw ripping lumber all day long. So here, you know, the ceiling is a polycarbonate roof, so there was no heat retention. I struggled the first time I put a fire to that place. It was useless. I couldn't keep heat. So I had to come up with something. So I put an interior an interior infrared retention, basically 6 mil liner there, and I created an air gap, and it really helped out. I can keep that barn at 55 degrees now throughout the night with that same fire. So when I first started, you know, I just thought I was going to grow everything in the world. I was just a growing fool. I grew lettuce and here's strawberries, and actually a neighbor from my old neighborhood had a strawberry patch that was overwhelming, so I volunteered to come thin it out for him. I potted it all myself. I hauled it all over. And so that's how I kind of got into the strawberry business. But you know, I was kind of a renegade cowboy too when I did this. I wasn't thinking about all the rules. I had dirt in the same facility that I was doing hydroponics in, and any of these pros will tell you that that's not the way to do it. So, you know, by process of falling down and getting back up again, I've since learned a few things. Here you can see I've got a gravel floor now, and I've since put some limestone, crushed limestone, which is very acidic and it'll keep the pests out. And here's a good example of everything under the sun. You can see I've got tomatoes up close, I've got some cucumbers off to the right there, and then the lettuce is all in the tanks. It started overrunning my light, a lot of tomatoes on the top shelf. It just kind of got out of hand, but I didn't know any better, so I was happy with it, and I had produce coming in. These are the tanks. You know, each one is 8,000 gallons. If I were to start raising fish, I've got plenty of the room. It is a little bit different method than you'll see traditionally with aquaponics. It's kind of my way of doing everything on a budget is really what it is. This is germination. I needed to keep my seeds warm, so I didn't want to spend the money on electric mats, so I built, this is just a germination box made out of all recycled material again. It's got an old thermostat in it and 4 incandescent light bulbs. So as my temperature in the box drops, the thermostat turns the light bulbs on, the bulbs warm my bottoms and my flats, and my seeds germinate. So I built 2 of those. They're a little bulky, but they work pretty well. So here they are sitting in the tray at day 5, 10, and 15. I usually try to shoot for day 15 or 16 to take this lettuce and move it into my hydroponic tanks that you saw earlier. Just another shot with winter time where I had glass over it to keep my heat. And here's kind of a shot of one of my racks in different stages. Like Brenda had mentioned, the whole facility, each rack is capable of 1,600 heads with that bottom tank filled up. You can see the rafts are floating there at the bottom. So each one of those can hold 1,600, 400 per shelf. So I break it down. I try to do, it's a 10-week cycle for me. So if you take 3,200 divided by 10, I can do about 320 a week at full capacity. Now you see I do have some switches here in the front. You can see I'm on timers and switches. I can physically override the timer with switches. Each switch is lights for each shelf. Otherwise it's on a timer and everything really runs itself. Like I said, and one pump is just pumping it up. So as we pump to the top, we fall, we drop. we come back, we do that, you know, through the process of the whole thing. And in the course of that, we drop 3 times. So I create oxygen in my water with each drop. So I don't have it oxygenated, but I am set up with air. I do have air to the tanks on wicks for future use. If I do get fish in there, I've got everything I need, so I think. So you can see that top shelf really does great. That's what the natural sunlight does for a guy. And it's to get those results down low is nearly impossible under those artificial lights that I have. I just bought 2 bulb fixtures. If I were to do it again with deeper pockets, I would have gone to a 6 bulb fixture. But the pockets were never deep to begin with. So that's why we're on 2 bulb fixtures. Here I am with watercress, which is huge in the Orient. It grows super in hydroponic applications. And it's kind of a specialty crop. You don't see much of it. And it's super good for you. It's good. We'll keep it at that. And then here's some kale, naturally. Kale, I've got rainbow chard. And again, you can see on the top shelf, it does a fabulous job. There was a head of lettuce, and there's some red butter crunch. Now here I am on a styrofoam sheet. I take a full sheet of styrofoam, which is 4 by 8, 32 square feet. I cut them in 4 for ease of handling. When that rack right there probably weighs 30 pounds, full of lettuce, roots, water. So they're handleable. But here's some red butter crunch, you know, ready to harvest. Some more shots of some finished product. You can see off to the left there, the second rack has got different stages, lettuce in it. You know, so at this point in time, I was, you know, at full capacity with the lettuce. Also, green peppers have done fairly well. There is a pepper hidden in there, a couple of them, but this is, you know, they did really well. Green peppers hidden right up in there, but they really are good at attracting aphids, and they kicked my butt. They whooped me. I had to get some ladybugs on the job, and then they did okay. Until I found a little parasitic wasp, and it did a phenomenal job. It took care of all my aphids, so I'm a big fan of this parasitic wasp. It's really done well for me. It's like a little flying ant. You wouldn't even suspect it to be such a butt kicker, but they do great. So tomatoes, like I said, I wanted to grow it all. I didn't want to wait, so here we go. I start cranking out tomatoes. And here's kind of like what a good, you know, starch white roots look like. Good, clean, healthy roots. And this is also a good shot of the media I use to grow the lettuce. It's kind of like a rock wool. It's got a brand name like Rodan. And it's just, it's like a recycled stone. And you just drop your seed in and transplant it into the tank. I did take bees on in there. I got a hive for production on my tomatoes when I started growing tomatoes. And the bees did okay. You know, I had never had bees before. I really wasn't a fan of bees. My dad said, get bees. I said, I don't like getting stung. He says, get bees. So I got bees. And so here I am with bees, and I never got stung. It was all good. But unfortunately, in the wintertime, it was too moist in there for them. They got mold on their honeycombs. They didn't make it. So I don't know if it was my bad or if it was too much moisture, but it didn't work out for my inside hive because they were inside strictly. There was no way out. They spent the whole winter inside. And here we are with some redworms, another way that, let me back up, hold on. So, okay, these totes are IBC totes. They're cut in half, and I started originally with 1,000 redworms, and this all started before the barn even went up. I got this vision that I needed to make good dirt before I got going here. So I started with 1,000 redworms. The redworms will double in about 60 days. So 1,000 comes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128,000, 264,000. We started gaining some good numbers after a couple years. And I had windrows outside that I would turn. I would went into town, and I got 2 grocery stores on board with me to give me all their produce. So I'd spend the time hauling all their produce back to my farm, putting it in the windrows, turning it by hand, feeding the worms, feeding the worms. So I got my worm count up into the millions maybe. I didn't spend the day counting worms, but I've got really good numbers where I can go out to this pile at any point in time and pull handfuls like that out of it. So when I got to this point, that's when I moved inside with them. This shot happens to be outside, but you can see I had a shade cloth there on the north side of my building. It was pretty shady anyhow. I just had to keep them moist. And you can see I've got some 5-gallon buckets under there, 2-gallon buckets. I don't know how I found out, but one day I had a bucket upside down there, and I picked it up, and it was full of worm castings and red worms. It was just, they went up the bucket, they pooped, and they left. So it's kind of rude, but I liked it. So I put buckets on top of each tote, and that's how I would harvest my castings. Once a week, I'd come in there with a drywall knife, and I'd just scrape them out, throw them in a sock, like a tea bag. Take my sock, drop it in the tank. I got my nutrients, nitrogen galore. So then all of a sudden, I got this vision, well, why don't I put 10 buckets in each one? So then I got smart and I started putting all the buckets in. So then I got tons and tons of castings. And so that's what the worms were good for, was my nitrogen, soil building, because like you see here, half my barn was soil at the time. I wasn't into a full hydroponic mode. I was just into gardening and exploring. So that's kind of where the worms came into play. And so here's tomatoes. I'm going to jump ahead one picture to show you why I don't grow tomatoes in my tank. Because they totally take over. You can't control that stuff. They cut your light away, the tomatoes sit in water. It was a big fight. So this tank is strictly greens now, and I do all my tomatoes like this. And I've since put 4 rings of tomatoes in like this. Each ring, you're looking at 30 tomatoes there, and I have 4 of them. So slicers and cherries, whatever, but these bags are same thing, rock wool material, encapsulated in a bag, and all I do is I have a reservoir of water that injects on a timer, X amount of ounces per hour, and that's how these tomatoes are grown. Now they grow up about 7 feet to a conduit ring that I've dropped from the ceiling, and then once they reach that ring, every week all I do is I move the string over and I drop a foot, and basically I'm just laying the plant down, and they grow around in a circle, and they grow around 4 times in their lifetime. They'll grow to be 30 feet long, and all they do is just drop clumps of tomatoes. So this is an immature picture, they're young, but that's how I do tomatoes now, and I found great success with it. This is a picture of a solar air furnace that I built to heat the place, but it doesn't work at night. It's just a sunny day kind of a heater. It's great. It works excellent. I've got about $1,600 invested in this thing, and really the only thing store-bought here are the downspouts, the paint for the downspouts. The sliding glass doors are all from roadside construction jobs. The 6x6 are just from around the farm. It's really just kind of it's on a snap switch, and how it works is anytime the sun will sit on it, naturally heats it up, and it's on a pivot, so January, February, March, as the sun goes up, I can change it, and it follows the sun around. And you can see the hole there on the left. It's a 4-inch coming in and an 8-inch going out, because heat expands. And basically all it does is I've got a blower inside, again, a used blower out of an old furnace. It pushes air from in the barn down the downspouts, around the corner, we call it a plenum, and all the way back. So it runs 52 feet in these black pipes, in the black downspouts, I should say. And over the course of the 52 feet, it heats the air up to 130 degrees. Now I've got a snap switch on there at 130, so it turns the fan on at 130, and it'll blow air until it reaches 90. And once it cools down to 90, it shuts that fan off. So it only blows the hot air in my barn, and on a day like today or the last couple days when it's been so sunny, it can honestly be 35 below zero, and my barn will be 55 to 60 degrees. This thing is awesome. I'm in the process of building one for my personal home. It's actually really effective. So here's just a couple stages. You know, the damn thing took up so much room in my barn. I wanted to integrate water into it too, with PEX tubing, and I could have heated water, but it got on my nerves. It was in the way. I had so much going on. I just kicked it out the door. So it's a heater now only, but it could easily heat water and air. It's fairly easy there. Here, so I dug like, you know, the neighbors thought I was, I don't know what they thought, but I built a coffin and I buried it under the barn naturally to get under the sidewall so I could get the heat in the barn. And I insulated it naturally with 2-inch insulation, retrofitted it here, 4-inch in, 8-inch out, you see that. And that's kind of what the finished product looked like. You can see it pivots to follow the sun. And so inside, this is a shot of the inside, goes up into another plenum box, and you can see the furnace there. I'm sorry, the furnace blower motor. And this is just kind of an illustration on, you know, we sit at 42 degrees latitude. So, you know, this illustration was for 40, so it's all very similar. And it just kind of shows you the angles where the sun is. And I just have to move it maybe twice a winter. It's really not a big deal. So there's your finished product. And like I say, most of it's all secondhand stuff. It worked out pretty well. Other than that, I heat with biomass, just like you see here. Last year I was paying $7 a bushel for corn. They were handing it to me. This year I'm doing okay at $4.20, $4.30 a bushel. It's a lot better. I mix it with wood pellets. And this alone does a pretty good job. At night, like I say, I'm holding 55 degrees, which is borderline for dormancy on tomatoes. It's not really the best, but that's all I can do. I can't get it any hotter. But it's sufficient. It works out well. I built an extension on it for my 3-day weekends up north snowmobiling, and it runs itself. And then, so this is an ozone generator I put together to create ozone to sanitize the air. I go through a lot of chlorine and hydrogen peroxide, and it's expensive, and I hate working with it. I ruin my clothes, I ruin my lungs, I ruin my skin, I ruin my day. So this is my answer to that. I take and I run electricity through glass as my dielectric media, and I create ozone gas, which, you know, when lightning strikes, it creates ozone. So ozone sanitizes the air. I don't know if you've ever been in a lightning storm, but you can smell ozone. It's got its own distinct smell. And it's, in my walk-in cooler, it's almost an airtight chamber. So what I do is I'll take all my foam trays and these styrofoam rafts, and I'll just dump ozone on them, and it'll just sanitize everything. You know, I spent many a day scrubbing, and it was no fun. So this, to me, is the way to roll when it comes to sanitizing the air, and even with water. You know, I'm in the process of learning how to get it into an air compressor to get it into the water, because the way I have it set up now, I don't have enough air to go underwater. I'm still tweaking it, but I'm not far off. I use it quite a bit. I just purchased another home this summer, and I used it to clean. It smelled. It had a little odor in the basement, and I turned this thing on for about a half an hour, and it cleaned the whole house. So again, in my germination room, my walk-in cooler, here I am growing some things. I've got the black trays are full of wheatgrass germinating. I've got basil on the right, and then all those are green peppers. I use the germination room in the wintertime. I heat it with just a space heater. It's a 12 by 16 room, and then in the summertime I cool it with an air conditioner. And it just gives me the capability to be controlled temperature-wise. And then I just have a couple finished products of my booth. I do Wakanda's Farmers Market and Lake Zurich's. Some local honey. I've got a vendor out of Lake Zurich that's got 19 hives, or I'm sorry, Fox Lake. So I get local honey there, golden beet, Swiss chard, white and purple kohlrabi, some turnips underneath. You know, just a few core things. And that's just kind of a shot of the booth laid out with all my produce. And then, you know, Duke's Ale House in Crystal Lake was a great establishment, and they picked me up right off the bat. And, you know, without them, that was a good foot in the door. Duke's is a great establishment, so I can't thank them enough as well. And that's my spiel. You know, I'm on McGuire Road. I'm there most of the time, And I am open to the public. Right at this very moment, I'm in the process of putting that floor in I spoke of and doing some other additions to the building. But March 1st, I'm going to have it open again to the public. So if you guys ever go by and you want to stop in and see it firsthand, you're more than welcome. And I appreciate you guys listening, and thanks again for having me.
Yeah, who knew you could potty train worms? Okay, last but not least, we have Andy McGhee. Andy is the staff aquaponics specialist. I know that title scares him, but he is the specialist for the Chicago Botanic Gardens Windy City Harvest educational programs. He designed, implemented, and now manages the day-to-day operation of 2 aquaponics systems for Botanic Gardens Windy City Harvest. One is a modest educational and research system for Windy City's adult education program, and it's located at the Richard J. Daley College. The other is a larger training and small production system, which is located inside the Cook County Jail facility. Windy City Harvest actually trains adults in sustainable horticulture and urban agriculture through Chicago Botanic Gardens' partnership with the city colleges of Chicago. Windy City offers a 9-month certificate program in urban and sustainable agriculture. And I heard him telling the high school kids earlier this afternoon that before they head off for college or whatever, and you can actually go through that 9-month program and come out of it with a certificate in urban and sustainable agriculture. So that's pretty cool. With funding from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity in collaboration with the Cook County Jail, the Botanic Garden manages an inmate gardening program. It's the Vocational Rehabilitation Impact Center, VRIC, and that provides educational programs that serves inmates during their incarceration. So with the participation of both the Windy City staff and the program inmates, the Vocational Rehab Impact Center's aquaponics system was added to the program in 2011. So Andy's going to talk to us about those programs and those facilities, and come on up, Andy. And then after that, we can take questions. So start thinking.
If you'll bear with me for a second, I'm going to do this funny thing because I walk around and you won't hear me. So let's see. Real quick about Windy City Harvest. It's the urban outreach component of Chicago Botanic Garden, and we offer certificate programs. We do weekend seminars. We do outreach for at-risk kids with both job skill training and paid jobs. We provide vegetables in a number of food desert areas on the south side. And when I came on, we started doing aquaponics. So that's Windy City. Look into Windy City program. It's a really wonderful program. What's aquaponics? Everybody does this. This is part of the required aquaponics presentation. The first one's the most important. It's really not about raising fish. When you see an aquaponics system, everybody runs up and they look at the fish. And fish are like the tertiary advantage to running aquaponics. It's not what it's about. It's about growing vegetables. As we already heard, it's variation on hydroponics. If you read about aquaponics on the web, they're going to say it's the melding of aquaculture and or hydroponics. It's not. It's a kind of hydroponics. It's soilless. It's recirculating. It's a closed system. Aquaponics has the advantage of, or the curse of, having to be run as an organic system. You've got fish, you've got essential bacteria, you've got plants. You can't put pesticides on the plants because it'll kill the fish. So you really have to run it as an organic system. And so we use all kind of beneficial bugs and beneficial bacteria, but it's a certifiable organic system. Some hydroponic systems can be certified organic, but many cannot. Aquaponics, if it's run properly, absolutely is. One thing that many people get into aquaponics, this bottom one here is very important. Hydroponics gives you tremendous control over what you're doing. You can have a very closed environment, and you really can dial down exactly what tomatoes need, exactly what lettuce needs. It's a very controllable environment. It's one of the big advantages of it. Aquaponics, many people that run aquaponics only do it part way, and they wind up filtering out a lot of the waste products from the fish and throwing it away, which is the most important part of what you're getting out of the fish. If you throw a lot of that away and then you have to add supplements to make up for the minerals that you threw away, what you're really running is a lousy, dirty, poorly designed hydroponic system, and it has fish in it. And so many people will pitch aquaponic systems that are only partially doing the job. And the whole point of it is to get as close to feed the fish and harvest the plants and leave everything else in the system. That's the goal. It's not easy to do. How does it work? I'm not going to do all of these. I'm going to spin through it real quick, but in nature, on your skin right now, everybody, in your lungs, on your hands, there are bacteria. There are two classes of bacteria that are amongst the most ubiquitous bacteria in the world. Without those bacteria, life as we know it wouldn't exist. Life has become more complex because of it. And these two forms of bacteria fix nitrogen in a form that plants can use. So without them, plant life wouldn't exist. Fish exhale ammonia or ammonium from their gills. We exhale carbon dioxide, fish exhale ammonia. The nitrifying bacteria, in a two-stage process, fix that nitrogen compound in ammonia, break it down and oxidize it and turn it into nitrates. The first stage is a nitrosomonas bacteria that turns ammonium into nitrite, and then a nitrobacter bacteria turns the nitrite into nitrate that plants can use. In an aquaponic system, it will just become loaded with nitrate, tons of nitrate. That's steroids for plants, and that's one of the big reasons it works. The second part of capturing the mineralization that you need for horticulture is the solid waste that the fish excrete contains everything else that was in their food. And if the food contains most or all of the nutrients that plant life needs, when they excrete that, it's for the most part is going to still be in that solid waste. So if you can capture that and biologically process it in some way, you can keep all that nutrient value in your system. So it's in a closed loop system, it really, really can become highly efficient. You don't have to buy a lot of supplements. This is a fairly good diagram of how it works. There should be another circle in this for a perfectly run aquaponics system. Here where you have the fish blowing out ammonia, they also drop solid waste. And the solid waste has to get processed also. In this diagram, it's filtered out, and they say, well, it's compostable. There you're throwing away all the good stuff, or a big part of the good stuff. In this diagram, you feed the fish and you have energy of some form. It can be electricity, it can be the sun, but those are your inputs in this system. The outputs are produce, fish protein, and this problematic triangle here. The bigger that one gets, the closer you're going to need up here to have a third one, which is mineral supplements that you have to put in to make up for this stuff you're throwing away. If this goes away, this is the perfect aquaponics system then. That's all I need to say. I throw this in here, it's a little out of order, but because of the conversation we just had about the solid waste, this is the small training system at Windy City, and this right here are what are called mineral beds. They're about a foot deep, and they're full of a rock called expanded shale. And they literally shoot shale into a kiln, and it pops like popcorn. It's very light. It's extremely porous. It is the heart and soul of my system here and why it works well. If I do say so myself, it does work very well. It's really a bioreactor, and it's also a growing media. You can see some early plantings that we put in there just to see how the system was working. The way these beds work, this is an auto siphon. It's called a Bell siphon. It's very old. It was invented at least 1,000 years ago in either Egypt or in Iran. Nobody's quite sure. But desert people needing to move liquids around, it's a really cool thing. And the way it works is water level will come up, and at a certain point, it will automatically form a siphon. And the siphon will drain that container that it's in. When it drains, it'll shut off, and it'll fill back up again. There's no moving parts, there's no electricity, no microchips, no cell phones. It just sits there and does its thing. Fills it and drains it, fills and drains it all day. Well, when the water comes up, it comes up to about an inch from the surface, and your rocks are saturated with ammonia-laden water, and all the fish waste and uneaten food is all in the rocks. The siphon kicks on and it drains out. When it drains out, it sucks air down into the rocks, and that oxygenates the rocks, because this is an oxidizing process for these bacteria. They have to have oxygen. So you get all this air down in that space where the water was. The nitrating bacteria can go to town, and these guys, the worms that we were talking about earlier, which live in these rocks, are just going to town on all that nice solid waste. And we put maybe a handful of worms into this, and now if you just take your hand and just scoop like 6 inches down and turn it over, you'll always come up with at least this many worms. The rocks are just full of them. So with all deference, we don't have to go around and pick up after the worms. It just stays in here, and it gets dissolved by the water. And so all your mineral fertilizer is produced by this system. A great deal of the oxygenation that the system needs is done by this, and it's a solid medium for plants to grow in. Even though it's inert, it's full of all these minerals that come from the fish. If you start reading about aquaponics, you're going to get tons of claims about how wonderful aquaponics is. You're going to see people that say the tomatoes will jump off the plant, they'll fry the fish up for you, and they'll put it on the table, and they'll light the candle. It's not true. It's a really sort of snake oil world for some people selling aquaponics systems, but read with a grain of salt. But the very most important one, and the absolute true one, and the one item that may have someday everybody in this room, if they have a backyard garden, thinking about aquaponics, is the conservation of water. We're running out of water as fast, if not faster, than we're running out of soil. In a place like this, we don't think about it. We have so much water. We're really blessed with water, but boy, most of the world doesn't have water. Many people, maybe 3 billion people on this planet, walk 10 or 15 miles a day to get a few liters of water. Water is really, really an issue. And the guys who did the initial real work on aquaponics were down in the Caribbean, a guy named Rakosi, and they were trying to figure out how to grow enough food on their island to be food independent when they didn't have a lot of fresh water. And they came up with aquaponics. And when you look at the work Rakosi did 30 years ago, it looks just like these aquaponic systems, because they nailed it pretty well, form and function. They did a good job. You get real accelerated production rates. I'll show you a couple pictures later. That's the second big advantage. And the third is you get a protein kicker when you harvest fish a few times a year, but the fish are really down the road. There's a bunch of other advantages, and I'm not going to go through all of them. There's a real odd social impact with aquaponics. When you have an aquaponics system and a bunch of kids come in to see it, they're really fascinated. It's like there's something about it, and I don't know what it is, that creates this like almost a sort of religious kind of reaction with some people that get into it. If you go home and you build a small aquaponics system, I warn you, it will get under your skin. And you can build a small system that sits on the table. You can build one big enough to feed your family if you want. And the system I'm going to show you will fit in your garage. But it will get under your skin, and it's very fun. It's tranquil, and it's a mystery about it I don't quite understand. But you can email me. I'll send you this if you want to see it. We don't need to go into all of them. It's very adaptable. It's also very scalable. The small system works, big systems work. It doesn't necessarily make money yet for various reasons, but it doesn't necessarily make money. The primary reason many urban gardening schemes don't work, why people struggle with hydroponics oftentimes, and especially with aquaponics, our modern agriculture functions inside a subsidy and an externality environment. Now, if you're a really ardent capitalist, which I am, I have been all my life, that idea can sort of rub against you. But if you really think about it, many businesses, the difference between breaking even and making money is what items that are on my balance sheet can I push off onto someone else that really I should have to pay for. Whether it's a smokestack that's dumping pollution into the next state so somebody else has to live with it, or it's a farmer who has pollution that's going down a river and destroying somebody's well 20 miles down the way. They're really getting away with not properly processing that waste or not paying for that impact that their business has. And many businesses in modern capitalism, if they had to pay for their externalities, the model wouldn't work. Everything would get readjusted and pricing would be very different than it is today. Agriculture big agriculture is a strong example of that. And aquaponics is a kind of endeavor that says, let's take all those externalities internally. We're going to pay for the vast majority of the cost of growing this food. You can't compete in an externality environment. Other things have to change, and a bunch of things might, but right now aquaponics is probably a very difficult make-money venture. Most of these other things I'll jump past. Here's some scalable examples. This place on the left is run by two really wonderful women down in Florida. They were very successful business folks, and they decided they wanted to do something different. They decided to start an aquaponics business, and they're very successful. They have a bunch of line extensions that they do to stay in business, but they have a really neat business. It's called Green Acres Aquaponics. There's a fellow I know in Arizona. He's been fiddling with aquaponics for about 15 years, and he has a little operation and a little lean-to that he built, and he grows the majority of the vegetables for his family. This place on the left is up in Chicago. There's a little pocket of not Chicago in the middle of Chicago called Bedford Park, and 500 people live there, and it's turned into a light industrial park. This place is a real spaceship. If you count, these are lights, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers high. It's almost 50 feet high. It's 185 feet long, and they have right now 4 of these rows. One of them is aquaponics. The other 3 are hydroponics. They got a lot of their money from Whole Foods. They're not profitable yet. Everybody hopes they will be, because this would be a bad failure for people who are wanting to get a bank to loan them money to do aquaponics. But it's a spaceship. When you go there, you go, wow, this is freaky. It's really big. This is a bunch of wealthy guys made a bunch of money in the .com of 2002 and had a lot of money to burn, decided they wanted to buy a big abandoned flower operation, bought all this glass house real estate. Big fanfare, they were going to be the biggest aquaponics operation in the world. About $450,000 later, they're out of business. They gave up. They might have found out that agriculture is a lot of work. I mean, it really is a lot of work. So, this is me. This is Cook County Jail's aquaponics system. On the left are the grow beds. Again, it's this urban multi-layer idea, which is not very efficient. You've got all these lights, they're very expensive. Aquaponics works a lot better in a hoop house. It's sort of silly to do it this way in the city, but everybody wants to see this. This is, urban agriculture. That's what it is. In Singapore, maybe you go up 20 feet high, but I'm not sure that this makes any sense economically today. That's half the system. This is Chris Procott from Windy City. He is over at the jail every day trying to get inmates to think they have a future. It's good work. This is the aquaculture side of it. This is a 1,200-gallon tank. That's a 300-gallon tank for fry and full-size fish. These are filters. This system does not have a media bed, so we have to filter and throw away all that good manure. These are our happy fish. Those are probably 4 or 5 inches long. There's a rule in aquaponics. If you're going to harvest your fish or eat them and you like them, don't put a window in your system. They come right up to you. You get to recognize individual fish. They have personalities. There's a lot more going on than just some little input reaction machine. The tilapia are a really interesting fish. That's me. These are this is Cleophas and Kevin. They were inmates at Cook County. I won't tell you why they were there, but it was a waste of our resources and time that they were in jail. We have a lot of people in jail like them that have no business being there. They screwed up, they broke the law, but it was a dumb law and they didn't hurt anybody. But they got out now, and I talked to them on occasion. They worked very hard. We built this system in about 3 months over at the jail. They're good guys. And not everybody in prison is a good guy. There's some bad people in prison, but a lot of the people that are in prison don't belong there, and we're paying a lot of money and flushing it down the drain. This is the other system that I built. This is the small educational system at Windy City. This is about 150 feet of grow beds, and it's two grow systems. This is the fish tanks over here. This is the media beds I was talking about, and these are the old traditional raft systems. This stuff right here, this green stuff, is duckweed. Duckweed's a really cool little plant. It's really tiny. It's maybe 1/8 of an inch across, has 2 leaves and a little root system, and it's about 12% protein. So you can just scoop this up and feed it to the fish. They love it, and it also covers the open spots so you don't get algae growing in your system. So it's a really neat little plant, although it will propagate everywhere. If you don't want it to propagate everywhere, don't put it in your system. It's a good metaphor. Life will go everywhere, whether you want it to go there or not. That's me. I know you didn't want to see another picture of me. I wanted you to see the scale of the system, though. You can see how high it is. The tanks are about up here. The idea is to pump once, pump up, and let all the water go down by gravity. This system has 2 pumps because I couldn't make it another 4 feet high. But in the perfect world, you just pump up once and it just runs down. These are about 6-month-old tilapia, maybe 7-month-old, and you can see here they're about 12 inches long. And you can also see how clear the water is. These fish are in there and they're eating all the time. This is about 2.5 or 3 feet away from the window, and the water is crystal clear. You can drink this water. I do it on occasion just to shock people. It's sweet. It does not make you sick. There's nothing in it that would make you sick, and I would argue that it's good for you. You expose yourself to stuff that we put hand wipes and, we kill our immune systems by not letting our immune systems be what they're supposed to be. But that's about, those fish are about a month from harvest size. Here's what the system looks like so you can see it without a bunch of stuff. If you start here, the water's in this sump. It's pumped up into these tanks. That's where the fish are. It comes out the bottom of the tanks here, out the bottom, and goes up into these grow beds. These are the beds. These are the beds that are full of shale. The bell siphons drain them into the rear sump, and it's pumped up a pipe up this into the float. Floats down the back, down here, and back into this. So it just goes around and around and around. If you build an aquaponics system, you'll start dreaming about water going around and around and around. And you'll wake up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, I hope it's not leaking. This system, though, actually is very fault tolerant. Any kind of system has a point of failure. If you're an engineer, you know there's nothing man can make that doesn't have a point of failure. But this system's pretty good. If you turn the electricity off, it just stops. It can't overflow. It can't overpump. If a pump sticks open, another spot will drain and it'll stop. So it's a pretty fault-tolerant design. And if you're a tinkerer, it's fun. This is really fun. It also points out that there's no such thing as an aquaponics system. Everyone's different. You saw pictures of every one of the systems look radically different. This is very different too. So if you're an engineer, there's a couple views of it. And I'm almost done. This is what a healthy bok choy looks like. I forget how old this is. This bok choy is less than a month old, though I guarantee it's about yay tall. These are Hungarian hot wax peppers. These are 6. I may be lying. They may be 7 weeks old, but I guarantee that in your garden outside, you would not get production like this in 7 weeks. This is because it's in such an incredible nutrient-rich environment. This is arugula. It is 12 days old. It is ready to harvest. This is Genovese basil. That's not Genovese. That's Ricarcia. But this is, well, it's about this tall. I mean, it's huge. It's 32 days old, and we had to harvest it. There was no more room for it. And this is peppermint cuttings, 5 days. These roots grew in this environment in 5 days. Day 1 and day 2, the peppermint was laying over on its side. Day 3, bang, it looks like this. In 2 weeks, it's a bush about this big. So the number 2 reason to use this system is these tremendous growth rates if you run your system well. The big Achilles heel with aquaponics is this balance, this living system that you've created. It'll trug along, and then one day it'll fall apart. And if it falls apart, it's a mess. And it takes a long time to get it back. Usually you have to drain it, dump it, and start over. It takes about 2 months to start one up. So it's far from perfect, but it is a really, really enticing way to grow food. And I'm hoping we see more and more of it. I just read an interesting article about a system in the United Arab Emirates where they're going to use saltwater fish in a big aquaculture system and then flood a huge area of open desert, and they're planting plants that are oil rich, and they're going to use these plants to create biofuels. It is sort of a big pilot project, but if it's successful, it could be a huge, huge help to some of our global warming problems, because you'd be greening the desert with salt water from the ocean, producing oil, and it's a carbon sink. Keep your eyes open for that. It's another version of aquaponics that may be done on a huge industrial scale. So it's not about the fish, but they're fun. They really are. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Okay, if anybody has some questions for our panel members, I see a mic up here. Please feel free to step up to it. And yeah, there's one here. Okay.
Thank you. I have about 1,500 gallons, about 500 tilapia, and it's the one thing that is amazing is the spacing too. That's one thing that in hydroponics and aquaponics is your spacing can be so much closer. I had jalapeno plants. Not one of them was less than 50 peppers per plant. I mean, it's just amazing the growth. But bringing it from, I had fish inside, plants outside for the summer. Then I had to bring everything inside. So that kind of just, made everything go down because I didn't have the beneficial bacteria and everything back up and running. And the amount of lights you needed. My question is, pH is big in both the hydroponics and the aquaponics. How easy, out here in McHenry County, it's all lime-based. Out of my well, I'm at 8.4. can't get it down, and I don't know if it really is worth the effort any longer. That was my main question.
What do you guys use? Here in the greenhouse, we have the same situation. We're on well water here. Most of the rural areas around here are still on well water, and yes, you're right, the pH is very high. If you were to have your water tested by a lab, they would actually give you a graph of how much sulfuric acid you would add to that water to get it to a certain pH. What we're using right now in the greenhouse is we're taking sulfuric acid, we're diluting it into water, and then we're using a dosatron injector to get it to exactly where we want it.
Is that for hydroponics or aquaponics?
We're actually using it for both. For the hydroponics, I'm getting it to 5.8, and we are keeping it reliably there. We're having some growing pains because we just started the semester again, so we're seeing some things that our nutrient solution is affecting it some. But we also use that as makeup water, having cut it with the regular well water so that we're right at 7.1 right now in the aquaponics system. So that's where I would really start. In terms of the importance of it, it's really important. At Brew and Grow, whenever somebody comes in and says, I'm really having trouble with the plants, they're off color, I know it's this, I know it's that, what's your pH? Oh, I don't measure that. Well, start measuring that and come back, because it is that important. So getting that under control is going to be one of those things that really helps.
I'm going to interject a couple of things. You say you had 1,500 gallons in your entire system? Oh, I'm sorry. You have 1,500 gallons in your entire system?
No, it's just for the fish tank.
Just your fish is 1,500 gallons. What's your total system?
Total system's probably about 3,000.
Oh, you've got a fairly big system. First, I'd argue you probably have way more fish than you should have. The emphasis on growing fish is misplaced. If you want to run a sustainable, stable aquaponics system, you probably have 3 times as many fish as you should have. You probably want 100 at the max. And what are you doing to, do you have media beds? Do you have raft beds? What's your design?
Yes, I take it from the tanks into the media beds the media beds go into the raft.
Just like my system there. Well, if you have, yeah, oh, good, yeah. What's your volume of your media beds then?
I don't have.
Okay, what's their dimensions?
Their dimensions are 4 foot by like 30.
Oh, they're really big. Well,
That's all of them combined. That's what.
no, the media bed
Yeah,
part.
I'm using the
Oh, well,
IBC total.
okay,
box.
fine,
I got
fine.
those.
Okay, well, stir them, every time you clean your plants out of anyone, stir them. I'd argue you're heavy on fish. How much heavy you are, you're heavy. You really want, in aquaponics, you want your pH to be about 6.5, less than 7, in that narrow band. You can get it down there pretty easily by that method, but you're going to always have a problem here in this area because you've got such alkaline water. You're just going to have to add acid. There's no way around it. Do it slowly. Don't just go, okay, I'm going to take it from 8 to 6.5. All your bacteria will die. You got to work it down, work it down. That bacteria will be happy up there at 7.5, 8. It will survive just fine. The problem is you need to look up a chart of the uptake rates in plants at various pHs. Most of your minerals will be happy even up at 8, but iron will not. And doesn't matter how much you dose with chelated iron, you'll never get iron and you'll get chlorosis on all your plants. So you've got to get that pH down to 6.5 to less than 7.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Anybody
sorry,
else have
sorry.
questions? No, you're good. Anybody else have questions? We've got the mic down here, or like I said, we've got the mic up here by the brass
Somebody way up
railing.
here. God, this is a quiet crowd of people. Look how well behaved they are.
Mic check, 1 2 1 2.
Yep, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. I come from the nearby town of Fox River Grove, and the Dominick's there was the only supermarket in town, and that one moved out as well as many others. So my question for you gentlemen is, can you comment perhaps to the feasibility or viability of using a space such as that to grow food for a population of over 1,000?
You're ambitious.
How deep are your pockets?
Good for you for being that ambitious. In terms of growing food in a facility like that, your issue is going to be similar to what he pointed out with the one in Bedford Park. That kind of energy, as much as urban farming is coming into it and taking the brownstones and areas in the city, that kind of thing, or brownfields, I'm sorry, in the city, and turning them into something like that is very laudable. It sounds like a great idea. Practically, it's just not the best direction to go. Electricity is still electricity, and even though we have some really good electric rates right now, to try and do the scale that you need for what you're talking about or any of these things, like he said, farmed here is, as of right now, is not turning a profit. They're a great marketing machine, they look good, they're getting money from all kinds of grants and stuff like that, but most of the companies that have tried doing it exclusively with electric light, exclusively with supplemental light, have found that it just isn't viable. So there's just not enough return on the product.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? There's one over here.
This is quick. I just wondered what your day length was in your, like the light cycle that you have?
Well, I run my lights backwards. They come on at 7:30 in the morning, and they go off at 9 o'clock. And we just mainly do that because of heat. Oh, I'm sorry. We turn our lights on about 7:30 in the morning, and they go off between 8 and 9 at night. I'm sorry. Let me do it again. They come on at 8 or 9 at night and come off at 7:30 in the morning. Yeah, we run them backwards.
Now, is there natural light then available too?
There's not much, no, we're all inside, I wish we weren't, but
Okay.
we run them backwards, and that way we don't heat the place up during the day.
Right. Now, in Kirk's case, he's got natural light basically for his top tiers.
I do run 16 hours throughout the day. I just do the morning, pretty much just like the natural light. I go on in the morning and I go off at night. No reason for it, but I put 16 hours of light on my lettuce.
Okay, and the top tier, for you though, the top tier are your oldest plants, so they're already...
Yeah, I utilize that real estate first naturally because it's the best real estate in the house. Absolutely. If I have to go under light, you know, I do naturally have to go under it, and I try to go for 16 hours.
Okay.
Even here in the greenhouse at MCC, we are looking at getting supplemental light into the greenhouses, especially over the winter time. We had a couple of different things to deal with, and we just don't have the natural light to continue to produce. It doesn't sound as sustainable, but the offset of being able to produce is what we can justify it with. The natural light isn't enough. The supplemental light we have to keep on just for a few hours to give a little bit of an extra punch for the plants, and we have to be mindful of some of the other projects in the greenhouse that require dark periods to be longer.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I just kind of want to go back to that thought because I want to leave here with a happy thought. This is all really, really cool. But when I hear that's not economically viable, it concerns me because, and I'm wondering if this is similar to how solar panels were just so expensive, but now they're getting cheaper and cheaper, and it is becoming more and more viable. Is that kind of the same thing with this industry, that we just aren't there yet for it to be economically viable, and we're hoping, or?
We're always hopeful.
Of course, me too.
No, we're always hopeful. The lighting technology, especially LEDs, is probably going to be the next thing that really has to prove itself. It's getting close. The company I work for, Brew and Grow, has been in the retail of indoor gardening for 30 years, and throughout that 30 years, the owner has spent hours looking at different LED fixtures, and it hasn't been until just recently that he started to see some where they're actually functioning. But they're functioning not so much where they're covering area, where the traditional kind of lighting that people are using for indoor gardening or supplemental lighting in greenhouses is high-intensity discharge. It's still much less expensive for the fixtures, for the bulbs, for the, everything that goes along with it. It's cheaper yet if you can do this in some kind of greenhouse facility. And that's really where it comes down to. It's not that you can't do something inside of a building. You just need to figure out a way to get that natural light into it so that you're using that natural light as much as anything to overcome the cost of electricity.
Okay, I see where the
And
balance is.
feasibility too has to do with, are you talking about personal use or are you talking about commercial use? And yeah, are you talking about your basement or are you talking about your back porch? So,
Makes sense, thank you.
On a small scale, I have an aquaponics system in my basement running off of a fish tank. I have a single 2x4 light running fluorescence. And that fluorescent fixture itself runs 432 watts. So for every 2 hours I have that on, that works out to right now, I think 4 cents is what our kilowatt is. So that doesn't sound so bad. But when you're talking about a 10,000 square foot facility that you're trying to light up with fluorescents, which are considered more economical than some other forms, it adds up very, very quickly. That's, so when you look at that one where he had 5 layers of light, you really have to think about how those numbers add up. Now again, it's like the farm here, they're getting subsidies. They're getting certain, certain things for being in Bedford Park and becoming an industry and stuff like that. And I think all of us on the panel would like to see that kind of thing phase out in terms of being the rule for agriculture.
Makes sense, and for just for growing personal use and for herbs and things like that, and subsidizing my food would be, sounds like it'd be a great thing. But ideally, you'd want to be able to have a sustainable way to feed this, growing population that we have. So that's kind of where.
start with your own backyard, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, of course, but
Yeah.
dream big.
We have a question. We have a question over here.
Okay.
So in the aquaponics system, what do you do for pest control? Because I know you said you can't use chemicals because you may kill the fish. So what are the alternatives?
Well, there's you have to pick your weapon depending on what your problem is, but we use lacewings and ladybugs, and there's various bacterial products that are good for different things, but you can find almost everything that you need in an organic environment for your pest control. But you just have to. The biggest problem actually with it is if you notice that you have an infestation, it's already a problem. If you're not really looking at your system all the time and you go, oh my gosh, I need some ladybugs, and it's going to take you at least 48 hours to get them there, get them to your place. So by the time they come, you really have a problem. And so you really need to watch your system, and you have to do all the things that would help alleviate that, like keep it really clean and keep all your fruit picked. But there's books on organic growing methods, and any of those books will tell you what's used in organics, and that's what you use in aquaponics. But mainly we use other beneficial insects, and they're always carnivores right up at the top of the insect food tree.
And I know for a fact Kirk's had some troubles,
Yeah.
insect-wise and other. If you pass that microphone, I'd like to hear him talk about the problems he's run into. Sorry.
It's okay. So aphids, the first time I got aphids, I'm like, they're going to solve their own problems. And that didn't work out too well. It really hurt. So I went with ladybugs, and they were great for about 2 weeks, and then they just quit eating. They didn't do much more. So A little parasitic wasp, looks like a flying ant, has been my answer, and I have very good luck with those guys. They don't quit until the job's done, so that's my answer to it, is beneficial bugs as well.
And you mentioned early on in your talk that you realized you were having a problem mixing soil and hydroponics. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, so people tell me, Kirk, you're doing it wrong, you can't be doing that, and okay, whatever. So, but no, yeah, the bugs, insect eggs, especially those worm bins, you get a lot of creepy crawlers in there, and then they fly around the barn, and it's really uncontrollable. So to have a sterile environment, I shouldn't say sterile, but a clean environment, and the closest thing to that is just to get dirt out of the building. The worms are out, everybody's out, it's just limestone and gravel with hydroponics now. So we'll see how that goes, but I expect it to go well.
Okay. There's a question here in the front.
I have read that PVC leaches undesirable chemicals. So what do you use for your tubing?
Yeah, this is one of those big controversies in aquaponics. We use Schedule 40 PVC. There's no strong indication that Schedule 40 PVC, if it's not carrying really hot stuff, or if it's not sitting in direct sunlight cooking all the time, is going to ever leach anything. But of course, I'm skeptical about these things. If you live in the city and you drive your car around and you're sitting behind a bus, or all the other kinds of environmental issues that you can get, I'm not sure that PVC is something you should worry about. It's such a ubiquitous material, you can't get away from it. I mean, your food comes packaged in it, the plastic bags that you get food in, it is just really everywhere. But there's not a lot, I mean, I've read a lot about it, and I've never come up with like a smoking gun that it will get you. But if you want to build a system and you're worried about it, pay the extra price for Schedule 80 PVC. And that's rated up to like, I think 220 degrees or something, and it's even more stable.
What's it called again?
Well, there's two kinds of PVC. I'm sure there's actually more than two kinds, but the two predominant kinds, one's called Schedule 40, and I believe it's good up to 150 or 160 degrees, guaranteed to not show any degradation. And then there's another kind that's called Schedule 80. If you have that concern, Schedule 80 is used all through industry for very hot, very caustic materials. And you have to remember that metal pipes aren't perfect, and you solder those. And the solders have stuff, I mean, you know, wake up in the morning and it's a dangerous world out there. And so you just can't, I mean, and it's worth considering, because our environment is really full of stuff. But pick your battles. What is in your food that you bought at the grocery store? So it says organic on it. So what? Do you know for a fact it's organic? If it came from Mexico or Chile or China, do you know what's in that food? I saw pictures, a friend of mine came back from Vietnam, and they grow tilapia there in the Mekong Delta. And the way they grow it is not all that awful. They use chickens over the tanks to feed the fish, which is, it sounds icky, but it's like a rather natural thing. That's what life does. But the Mekong Delta is a huge industrial sewer, and the fish are living in it. And if you go, next time you go to the grocery store and see tilapia, it's going to say China or Vietnam on it. If it says Vietnam, it's probably got more heavy metals in it than you want to think about, but you don't know about it. And so that, you see what my point is. If you want to grow your food and you really want to know what's good, yeah, PVC may be really, really awful, but I think it's way down the line of worry. I think if you build your system and you run it organically, and if you're worried about it and you use Schedule 8, you pay the extra 30% to run, Schedule 80 pipe. It's the least of your worries. And it's sure better than buying food that's sourced from somewhere you don't know. And in fact, that's, I think, one of the big risks we take in this country. Most of our food is sourced in ways that we really don't know where it's sourced from. And we will probably wake up one day and have a real nasty food event. And it will be from food that's sourced that's not properly inspected. And we used to inspect a lot of our food. And that was back when people used to die all the time from food poisoning, and we've forgotten about those times. And now we don't inspect so much, so.
Okay. Anything else? Yep, there's one right here in the front, or there's one over here too.
I have a question. I want to go back to the worm bin. Earlier today, I kind of reviewed a video of Will Allen's growing power in Milwaukee, and I was kind of confused about the kind of systems he was growing. I've actually been there, but it was a long time ago, so refresh my memory. But vermicompost question, when you are having an aquaponics system, do you use the vermicompost to make a tea to start the nutrient cycle in the system? I'm not getting where how the worm...
There's something called cycling a system, and that's when you're first getting those bacteria to go. So you've got a lot of ammonia in the system, and you don't have the bacteria to break it down. Then the bacteria, the nitrosomonas comes up, and the ammonia drops down. And then you have nitrates spike up because you don't have the nitrobacter, and then that comes up, and then everything levels out. And I just throw fish in sterile system, feed them. A few. You don't need a lot, but the bacteria is in them. And as soon as you put them in there and some amino acids are starting to be present and some ammonia is starting to be present, they'll go to town and start working. What Will does is they have compost heaps and they leach water through it. And then they collect that liquid. And that liquid they call worm tea. And it's just they've leached all the casing, the nutrition out of that compost. We're just keeping it in the system. We're letting the worms do their thing, and it's all the casings are just dissolving in the system.
Gotcha.
So they're in there, but they're just getting, and that's why it works. All the minerals from the worm activity is breaking down the solids that you would throw away if you filter it out.
And that's why they're in that...
that's why they're in, but they got to live somewhere, and they don't drown. I mean, they're in there, and there's water. They're still there. It goes down because there's oxygen. When the worms come up after a rainstorm, it's because the water's become totally saturated, and the oxygen gets depleted. When the oxygen gets depleted, or at least this is what I've been told. Now, I'm not a worm expert by any means, but I believe when the oxygen gets depleted, they come up.
Right.
But our worms never come up. I mean, they're in there all the time, and they're completely submerged. And every once in a while, you'll see one that'll get all the way into a tank. And he's down there because that water's super oxygenated. He's alive.
Okay, and Kirk, you've got worms, but you don't have fish.
Right, correct. Yep, I use red worms, and I told you I took the castings out of the bucket via a drywall knife, and I just throw them in a sock or some kind of a containment, and it just leaches into the water.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question up here in the front.
My concern was heating, and that came to mind just the gentleman over there, the very ambitious gentleman who was talking about the grocery stores. And I mean, lighting is a big financial issue, but heating, living in a place like the Midwest, I was wondering if you had any opinions. I know, Kirk, you mentioned solar heating, and I was just wondering perhaps if you had a scale of how much financially you invest into heating your barn, or what that would come to.
For me, it's the biggest fight I fight. That naturally, like I say, that roof of mine doesn't really hold heat as nice as I'd like it to, so I'm always at the elevator, filling my truck with corn and hauling it home. It's my biggest hurdle, to be honest with you. So yeah, propane's not the answer this year. It's corn and biomass this year. It's probably the most cost-effective way I could be doing it. But last year, like I said, corn was at $7 a bushel. So what do you do? But it is a huge part of the grand picture. Absolutely. Like I say, I can hold 55 degrees at night, but a tomato will go dormant under 65. So why am I there heating it? Why am I spending the money to keep it dormant when it should be growing all the time? So that's a huge part of the grand scheme, and that's a great question.
There's another one here.
You have the area, have you looked at geophysics?
Hang on, let's get that mic so we get you on recording.
Yeah,
Since you have the area, have you thought about geothermal heating for you?
I have, yep. I've got a backhoe and an itchy trigger finger too, and I'll jump on that thing and we'll have it by the afternoon. My problem is the pump, running all that water, or liquid, whatever it is, glycol, water, however we do it. To circulate that long, you know, you need a grand distance of pipe for that to be effective. So what stopped me was the size of the pump needed and the electricity to run that pump. Is it cost effective? It might be. It's something I guess I should look into more, but that was the initial thought I had too, is to cool my water, because I have 2 propane pool heaters for wintertime heating, but to cool it, you know, we get these summers that are unbearable. Hot water is the death of a lot of things, so you're right, that's a good point. And I'm still working on that. That's something that I need to work on, but my main objective was the cost to run the pumps.
Okay, anybody else? We should probably wrap this up pretty soon. I'm going to ask Kim back up to talk about next week's program. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Dave and Nabong again from Brew and Grow here in Crystal Lake. I'll say that right. Brew and Grow. And adjunct professor here at MCC. I'd also like to thank Kirk from his own business, that's Cashmore's Produce and Ponics, and Andy McGhee from Chicago Botanic Garden. Kim?
I echo all those thanks, and I also thank our moderator, Brenda Dolphers. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And of course, we thank you for coming out. We invite you back next week for our 3rd and final speaker series. Next week, we have a really interesting topic, not that they haven't all been interesting, called biomimicry. We have a speaker and a video. And I honestly didn't know much about biomimicry until we spent some time doing a little bit of research, and a lot of people sort of look at me sideways. So really quickly, biomimicry is using processes and patterns found in nature to make businesses more efficient. The best example that makes it easiest to grasp onto is that somewhere down the line, someone figured out that if you model a wind turbine blade after a whale's fin, it's much, much more efficient. And there's all sorts of amazing examples that go along with that, but we have a speaker and a video, and we're really excited, so we invite you back at 7 o'clock next week. Thank you again, and have a great evening.